Nolan's filmography is nothing short of incredible, one of the few movie opinions I think we can all agree with. Just like The Lion King being one of the greatest animated films of all time, Spielberg being one of the greatest directors of all time, and Angry Birds 2 being a great fucking idea. Nolan's got a new film coming soon, so let's take a look at what I believe is his best work yet. Soon-ish. Look, when you spend around 9 or 10 years working on one screenplay, make films like Memento, Insomnia, The Prestige, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and end up grossing so much money that you could buy out my entire life, it was pretty inevitable that Inception was going to be great. Don't get me wrong, just because you take years on a screenplay doesn't mean it'll be amazing, but come on, this is the Christopher Nolan we're talking about here. After finishing Insomnia in 2002, Nolan had an 80-page screenplay on a film about dream stealers, which actually was originally intended to be a horror film, but ultimately decided he needed more experience directing bigger movies, so he went and made Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. Nolan literally used some of the greatest superhero films ever put to screen as practice for Inception. That's fucking awesome. But once those Batman movies hit the screen, Nolan finally had the receipts to make his sci-fi heist original film a reality. And Inception became a hit with everyone and everything. Critics loved it, audiences were in awe at the complexity and depth of the film, and it won a couple of Academy Awards as well. Nolan was already a household name by this point, but I do believe this set him on another level from other filmmakers. A story that didn't feel possible or tangible, Nolan made it reality. Inception doesn't waste not one frame in its 2.5-hour runtime. The movie took 10 years to make. Nolan is not playing any games here, guys. He leaves the audience asking so many questions from the first shot alone, and from then on you'll still be asking tons of questions followed by plenty of moments that'll leave you saying, oh. What is really fascinating about the film is the creativity of the CG, not the overabundance. By now it's well known, but in case you're unaware, Nolan tends to downplay CG only when absolutely necessary, and it makes a nearly 10-year film feel like it was made yesterday. Granted, there are still moments that are heavily CG because while Nolan is a genius, there's no way in hell he can practically fold a city in half, but these scenes feel grand since most of the movie's effects are done practically in the film. Even with the visual prowess of the film, the core of the movie is still about Cobb, the protagonist in the story. All he wants is to be able to see his kids again, and when given the opportunity to do what seemed impossible before, he goes and accepts the challenge, and boom, we have the plot for Inception in 18 minutes set up and ready to go. Did I mention how much I love that there's no time wasted? Any film is going to have exposition. The grander idea, the more complex, the more exposition that will be present to ensure that the audience member doesn't get lost in the story. You guys know where I'm going with this. There is a lot of exposition in the film, but that's far from a bad thing. Exposition is not bad to use in films, as I feel like we've kind of stigmatized it in the film community, but it's the way in which it's used that can make or break a movie. Inception's ideas alone warrant the heavy exposition, but it's not like the characters turn into the camera and just explain everything. Far from it. Concepts, ideas, and rules are introduced throughout the narrative organically, so it never feels forced to the viewer as we're learning with some of the characters about the idea of Inception. The possibility of being stuck in limbo forever, the viewer growing a closer connection with Cobb while the film progresses as we learn more about him. The screenplay is so well put together as it reveals moments at the right time. The film definitely feels like it took around a decade to make, as everything is so refined and the amount of depth that the film has is nothing short of impressive. You have to be thinking and following along with the plot to know what's happening, where it's going, and understand the emotional payoffs. And if you're not, well, you're watching some cool stuff on screen, so there's that. When Inception is broken down structure-wise, it's not complicated whatsoever. It's actually a rather simple movie. The first act is gathering up the team to pursue the ambitious task at hand. The second act is following through with it and the problems that arise while doing so. And the final act ties up the loose ends and is some of the most suspenseful filmmaking I've ever seen. Every second matters as the stakes have been raised to the highest point thus far. And now that we know what can happen if they fail, it is an incredibly suspenseful final act that'll leave viewers blown away at its conclusion. I love that the structure is so simple while the ideas and story are so grand. It is the definition of a simple film done in a complex fashion, and it pulled it off, dare I say, perfectly. To say the action set pieces are exhilarating is pretty much saying the sky is blue, The Godfather is perfect, and Angry Birds 2 was a good fucking idea. But they are heart-pounding, tension-filled summer blockbuster goodness that will leave everyone at the edge of their seat. In a film that is so caught up in the visuals, the story, the ideas, I'm glad Nolan still took the time to actually develop the protagonist and give him an arc and meaning. Granted, had he not done that, I think plenty of us would still adore the film for everything else it was able to do, that by the end you will feel rejoiced with how much Cobb has developed as a character and that he finally got to see his kids. If that's what you interpret from the ending, that is. The final shot in Inception is one of the most talked about endings of all time. Is it a dream? Is it real? So much discussion and speculation that I know Nolan is smiling and having a great fucking time knowing that we'd all be going crazy trying to figure it all out. Inception leaves us wanting more but satisfied as as well. I sure as hell wouldn't want a second one, and I've never spoken to anyone who does, because this film in its entirety is incredibly well done that there's no need for a second. There's not one frame that is wasted. It's all a big snowball of intrigue and suspense building up until the final shot of the film. It leaves the ending up to the interpretation of the viewer, making Inception timeless, as there will always be something to mention and discuss for years to come. In my opinion, this is by far in a way Nolan's best film. The ideas that he was able to capture on screen and make coherent, while making a character that the audience can get invested in, having some of the most groundbreaking visual effects ever put to screen, a score that is as emotional as it is kick-ass. There is no other Nolan film to me that tops it. I love the Dark Knight trilogy. Almost. Memento is incredible. The Prestige is not talked about enough, and it's phenomenal. Dunkirk has some fantastic visual directing being displayed, and even Interstellar, which might be his weakest film, still has a lot to say about family and love. Inception to me still ranks above all. It is a film that I truly believe no one but Nolan could have made. It's his magnum opus, his masterpiece.